Good evening, everyone. You're in the right place at the right time. This is Coast to Coast AM, blasting out of the Mojave Desert like a Scirocco, blazing across the land, into your town, into your home, slamming into your radio like a supercharged nanoparticle of unobtainium. Greetings from the boldest, bawdiest, most outrageous city in the world, the planetary capital of sun, fun, sin, sex, and secrets, my not-so-humble hometown, Las Vegas, Nevada. My name is George Knapp, your occasional host, your designated driver of the airwaves, and moderator of tonight's upcoming cacophony of conversation. So glad to be back with you once again. I don't know how many of you are out there in select cities across America today celebrating with the Raelians. You know the Raelians, right? We've had Rael, the prophet, on the show before. Their headquarters has relocated to here in Las Vegas, and they are an interesting group by any definition. They staged an event today in several American cities called Go Topless Day. Kind of a rally, kind of a protest, little bit of a party all rolled into one. The Raelians think it's hypocritical or contradictory for men to be able to walk around with their shirts off, but not women. So they just plan to invite some men to put on some bikini tops and strut around in public while the Raelian women would wear no tops at all. Not sure how many Raelians turned out across the country, 5 or 6 different cities, but I'll bet there are at least a few interested spectators out there to scope out the situation. I should add, I was not among them. The world doesn't need to see me with my shirt off, let alone wearing a bikini top, and I'm sorry to even put that imagery into your head. We got a lot of good stuff for you tonight, a jam-packed program, some different takes on familiar topics, but kind of coming at them from angles that you may not have considered before. In a couple of minutes, the erudite, always sharp Peter Robbins here to talk to us about some familiar terms from the UFO world and how they might have a common thread that has not been considered before, at least not by me. Roswell's 509th bombing wing, you remember that those guys, that outfit? The Betty and Barney Hill abduction case, perhaps the most famous abduction case in history. The so-called incident at Exeter, an amazing UFO story, lots of solid witnesses in that one. All of them with ties to an area of New England that might just be a window to another world. I don't know. Peter Robbins joining us in a few minutes to tie it all together. In hour 2, a bright young lady I had the pleasure of meeting at a UFO conference a couple of years ago. Farah Yorduzu is arguably the top UFO researcher, as certainly the best-known UFO researcher in her native country of Turkey. But her work extends far beyond lights or craft or weird stuff in the sky. She's also mastered ancient tales of mystery and magic from her country's past and how they might relate to what's being seen in the skies in Turkey in record numbers in recent years. Farah is the author of a new book with a new slant on the alien abduction scenario. The title is provocative. Love in an Alien Purgatory, it's called. And it raises some uncomfortable and bizarre questions. Are visitors here for breeding purposes? And if so, what about a little romance thrown in along the way? Is it possible to have not only physical interaction with some other kind of species, but maybe a relationship? Farah wrote this book based on a lifetime of strange encounters reported by a man named David Huggins, and he will be joining her and me in hours 3 and 4 of tonight's program. And I think this is just one where we have to engage in what the film critics might call the willing suspension of disbelief, because it's strange stuff. We just have to follow the story where it leads. Our friend and webmaster Tim Binal has helped me put together odds and ends in tonight's Naps News section on the Coast to Coast website. One article posted there is by a talented writer and blogger named Steve Hammonds, who goes right for the jugular in responding to something that was written by a journalist for the Washington Post. And this Post reporter takes considerable liberties with the UFO story, the UFO subject matter. Steve gives him his due. And there's another article about a talking head from the BBC. And I don't know if you've seen this online, but this guy announced days ago, no matter what evidence surfaces, no matter how much proof there is, even if a UFO lands on the White House lawn or out in front of Buckingham Palace, or an alien taps this guy on the shoulder, he simply doesn't believe, couldn't believe, wouldn't believe that there is anything to it. And nothing, he says, will change his mind. Not exactly what we're used to hearing from journalists, professional broadcasters, at least not hearing them admit it in public. And I know that some of our listeners agree with this because every time we talk about UFOs on the program, they'll go nuts. As I've said before, though, if you don't like hearing about UFOs, you're listening to the wrong show. We don't cover it every night, but we do cover it. In fact, we have posted some UFO video from Turkey on the website to go along with what we'll be asking Farah about in the next hour. And thanks to Ryan in Seattle for sending that in. Also, a new scientific and technical report from France about the UFO topic. It's not a formal government report or study, but the people who helped put it together worked in government and were bigwigs in industry, and they seem to feel the subject is worthy of genuine investigation, that there really is something to it. We got the link on the website. You may recall last month we looked at how the internet and all these modern devices, cell phones, Google, BlackBerry, texting, Twitter, how they might be rewiring the human brain, maybe causing some permanent changes in our cognitive processes. Fascinating study underway, just concluded, I guess at least part of it concluded, by some academics who decided to see what happens when connected people, and by connected I mean connected to technology, not like connected to the mafia, people who have a cell phone in their ear all day long, or they're on the internet as soon as they crawl out of bed, or maybe even before they crawl out of bed. How would they react if it was all taken away? If they were put out in the sticks, out in the boondocks, with no computers, no phones? How would their brains react? Pretty cool experiment. Good article from the New York Times. Take a look at it when you get a chance. And there's one other piece that looks at the growth of mega cities, how our world is undergoing yet another profound transformation, most of it in the developing world. Finally, a link to the official U.S. government disinformation webpage, or rather, anti-disinformation webpage, wherein our government, the U.S. government, devotes its resources, its time, our money, to responding to all sorts of stories. Balderdash is basically what the government's position is. 9/11, was it an inside job? The moon landing, was it faked? UFOs, is it all nonsense? A lot more. And I haven't read all of what's on this site, but if the UFO section is any indication, the site's about an inch deep. Really weak treatment of the topic. And my guess is this site is put up there for people who really don't want any of this to be true anyway, so they can point to the website and say, see, there's the official word from the government. It's all a bunch of baloney, because, as you know, we can always trust the government to tell us the truth. And yes, that was sarcasm. So take a look at our postings. There's also a notice and a link about a pretty cool UFO gathering coming up in New England in about 2 weeks. We'll ask Peter Robbins about that little shindig right after this break. By the way, happy birthday to my brother Dave, listening in Stockton, California tonight. I think this birthday finally makes him older than me, and it's about time. I'm George Knapp. We'll be right back with more Coast to Coast AM. Our friend Peter Robbins is one of the best-known and most respected UFO investigators, authors, speakers. He's been at this stuff for about 30 years, wrote a really excellent book, Left at East Gate, which was about the Rendlesham Forest UFO incident, otherwise known as Bentwaters, and he's helping put together a little event at Exeter, a UFO event that we'll learn more about. Peter, good to have you back on the show.
Hi, George. Great to be back on with you.
Hey, I was looking at all these connections between these different sort of UFO events and names and places, and was amazed to see your synopsis of all the different stuff that seemed to have ties to New Hampshire, New England, starting with, I guess, the earliest known UFO photo is from New Hampshire?
It is indeed from 1870, and I should say that, the points that I've delineated here, this is not my research. It's all original work by a colleague in the Exeter area, Dean Merchant. For health reasons, he's not going to be able to give this paper, and he's got me very involved in like you say, the phenomenal connections. I also have to go on the record here and say I'm the co-author of Left at Eastgate with my good friend and colleague Larry Warren, who you know, and who, of course, was involved in the incident.
Sure. I don't want to give you too much credit. Back to this photo.
Yeah, by the way, I'm still very upset at that visual image of you in a
sorry.
bathing suit. Yeah, all right.
Yeah, don't even say it again.
No.
This photo, what does it show?
It shows, again, this is pre-digital, to put it mildly. It is a definitive cylinder-shaped craft. There seems to be a marking like an old-fashioned German cross-type marking on it at high magnification. But you see it against the mountains. It's beautifully silhouetted. It's actually a very fine photo. There is no question as to its authenticity. Of course, we don't know what it is, but it is truly anomalous. And to the best of my knowledge, photography originally coming into play in the early 1840s or so, this is the first fully authentic, agreed-upon photo of an anomalous object taken certainly in this country and maybe in the world.
You should maybe have you or your colleague that dug this stuff up send it to the website. We'll put it up there at some point.
Count on it.
I guess along the way, though, you and he, or mainly he, have dug up a whole bunch of UFO activity dating way, way back in that area, and not just this photo, right?
Well, to put it mildly, way, way back, Dean actually begins looking at UFO activity in the 1600s, and he has gone to really the best sources, which are journals kept by a former governor, Governor Winthrop, and journals dating back to 1639. Again, English, it's more of a Middle English, but these do seem to be descriptions of hard phenomenological sightings. And in several cases, as we move through the pre-revolutionary events, something that sounds like an abduction experience. Again, there is no question about the authenticity of these documents, but this is an area that has a long and wonderfully paranormal history going back before this country was founded.
We'll get to some of the more recent incidents and the better-known incidents in a few minutes, but is there something about the area that makes it special, or is there a reason why it would these things would be happening for hundreds of years there?
George, you know, the best that any of us can do is make educated guesses. We all know that there are areas around the country and around the world that simply have higher documented historic incidences that go back, in some cases, to time immemorial. In more modern times, certain areas, I think, have solidified their interest for these other intelligences because of nuclear presences. And now in that same area of New England, in New Hampshire, you have what they call the nuclear triangle, which is composed of the Pease Air Force Base, the submarine manufacturing facilities nearby, the great shipyards, and now a nuclear generator on the coast as well. So not unlike the very first incidents with the 509th in Roswell, and much more modern UFO events involving nukes. This seems to just replicate that pattern, but it does have a pre-existing history going back into early American history.
All right, let's tie in the 509th. We all know the 509th from the Roswell story. That's the America's first atomic bomb wing, but I had no idea that it had anything to do with New England.
Yeah, you know, it's just one of those areas of specialty research that I think has kind of slipped through the cracks. None of this information is shatteringly new. It's just that no one has thought to put it together. The 509th, of course, were, at the time of the Roswell incident in the summer of 47, the only nuclear strike force on the planet Earth, and of course would be of interest to folks from other places. They were, of course, key involved in the event in ferrying material from the crash site, recovered bodies, to Army Air Corps headquarters in Texas and beyond. Many of the officers went on to highly prestigious positions, and ultimately the 509th was rotated out of New Mexico. And I was just not aware of this, for starters,